honorable ministers and senior government representatives, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for joining our virtual 27th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We cannot commemorate in person this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we remain committed to remember, unite, and renew. Today, we will hear from members of government from the Nordic countries, Rwandan Senator Dr. Emmanuel Habugimana, testimony from Console Nishimwe, and messages from the Rwandan youth diaspora, as well as closing remarks from Her Excellency Ambassador Christine Nkurikiinka. We will also hear songs of commemoration. The genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda remains in our collective conscious among the most horrific events in recent human history. In 1994, Rwanda lost the lives of over 1 million men, women, and children, with many survivors left with the wounds of the horrors they lived. May we please take a minute of silence in remembrance of those we lost. Thank you. We will now hear testimony from survivor Console Nishimwe, followed by a recital of Kunda Cook's writings by Isaac Shema from Sweden's Rwandan youth community. Console, the floor is yours. You may unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you so much for having me. Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us as we commemorate and remember our loved ones we lost in 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. As they said, my name is Console Nishimwe. I am currently living in New York City. When the genocide happened, I was a very young teenager, 14 years old. And I was very fortunate to have both parents who were teachers and 4 siblings, my youngest sister and my 3 younger brothers. And really, I was very also fortunate to have a big family. So at that young age of 14 years old, I've seen unimaginable horrors. I would never wish for any person to see. At that time where I was born in the western province of the country, it used to be called the Kibuye, in a place called Rengera. That's where I grew up. Myself, my family, all of us were forced to go into hiding for 3 months. Unfortunately, the first April 15th, my dad was murdered when the killers followed him, and the rest of us were hiding in a home where somebody, a family, actually allowed us to be hiding. I remember that day in the evening when the killers were talking outside, rewarding themselves with beer, talking how they have murdered my dad. And my father was a very good person who was a teacher in the community. who have taught many kids, of some of them have murdered him, and they murdered him simply because he was a Tutsi. And the rest of us, my mom, the rest of my siblings, we kept hiding for those 3 months. And people we thought were good friends refused to help us, hide us in their home. They called some of them killers on us on several occasions, and where we were found. And many times we were hiding in the bushes and very hungry. My mom carrying my younger brother, who was 16 months old, on her back. It was very horrifying. And sometimes as a survivor, you can't find the words to describe what it felt like. And throughout the time, we kept praying and praying, hoping that we will survive. So unfortunately, on May 9th, we will find where we're hiding again, because we hid in many places at a time. And unfortunately, my brothers were taken. These were young boys who were ages 9, 7, and 16 months old. And the youngest was always on my mom's chest and back, and that boy was taken from her. All of us crying, begging to be killed, and they took them to our already destroyed home and slaughtered them and threw their bodies in a septic tank. And one of those people who have murdered my brothers was somebody who grew up with my mom. I thought they were good family. And even though we didn't want to hide anymore, we kept trying. It was painful. We were suffering within. But what many of you know, that during the genocide, rape is used as a weapon. Many young girls, even older women, Tutsis, were systematically tortured and raped. Some of them were immediately killed. And at the time, unfortunately, I'm one of those many young girls who was raped. And as a result, I've been living with HIV. And the person who raped me was somebody who was my neighbor, somebody I've seen my family have helped their family many times. And thankfully, my mom, my sister, and I were able to survive because the RPF stopped the genocide. But throughout those 3 months in hiding, it was painful. We found out later that many of our family members were murdered on both sides, my grandparents, uncles, and sisters, aunts, and many others. On my dad's side, almost everyone was murdered. On my mom's side, fortunately, I have a few cousins and my mom's older sister. After surviving the genocide, I carried the pain within. As a young teenager who was very young, who was happy before, but then now I'm living with the pain and I'm suffering within. I didn't know whether I was going to function again. And later on, finding out as a result that of rape that I am living with HIV, it was the hardest thing. It was a constant reminder of what I've been through during the genocide. I'm one of the many. So of girls and women who live with those consequences, it was painful for me to even decide telling my story, which was therapeutic for me. And what I've done, I decided to start writing slowly in my journals, and it became a book, which is a memoir I've written about my experience. When I was writing my story, I was thinking many women and girls and many other survivors, and some of them who went through horrible experiences more than me. And I want to make sure that our stories are told. And I didn't want to live with the shame of what I've been through. And those who have done what they've done to us should be the ones to carry the shame, not as survivors. And I want to make sure that the world know what we've been through. And I committed myself to tell the story, and I'll tell other survivors' story who are not going to be able to tell their own stories. I'm encouraging them to do the same. And that's why it's not very easy. And the healing is a journey. So for me, writing also has been therapeutic for me. And that's why I also encourage others to do the same. So, and one thing that has helped me in my life, and I would say it's my mantra that I live with, no matter what horrible circumstances you may face in your life, never lose hope. For losing hope is the beginning of your own self-defeat. Before I end, I just want to say that my mother is one of the strongest heroes among women, widows who survived after the genocide. Even the resilience of many of my fellow survivors encouraged me more to speak on their behalf. And I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Rwanda nziza mubyeyi wacu, mbese urabura koma, mugongo waduhetse twese, uraturera turakura, ndabibona ko ubabaye, ubabajwe n'imfura zawe, twebwe abasigaye tuzaguhoza amarira, tuje kuguhoza twese, twese isonga abana bawe. Hora, hora mami hore, hora mami hore, hora shenyi hore, ihorere mubyeyi, hora rwanda ihore, hora, hora rwanda ihore. Nubwo rwose bitari byoroshye, biriya bihe byahise.
And now, a recital of Kunda Cook's writings by Isaac Shema from Sweden's Rwandan youth community.
My name is Isaac Shema, a child of a genocide survivor. Very often I get asked, what do you remember about genocide? You weren't even born yet. I respond, I remember not because my eyes saw it, but because my ears heard of the sad stories of the death of my family. I remember because I lost family before I even knew them. I mourn a happy childhood I didn't get because my parents were robbed their happy lives. I remember because I lost a happy country and community to genocide that killed my people. I remember those families that were destroyed, leaving no one to remember them. I remember all the Tutsis that died a miserable death they didn't deserve. I was not born yet, but I live with the effects and wounds of the loss I had before I was born. I remember the 1994 genocide against Tutsis so that it won't happen again. I hereby call upon each and every one of you to continue praying for our country so that the terrible events of genocide don't happen again.
Thank you, Console, for your strength in sharing your difficult journey. And thank you, Isaac Shema, for shedding light on the effects of the genocide against the Tutsi on the generation that came after. Joining us live from Kigali with a message on genocide denial is Senator Dr. Emmanuel Havugimana. Senator Havugimana is a member of the Senate Commission of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation and Security. From 2016 to 2019, he has been the president of the board of Rwanda's National Commission to Fight Against Genocide. Senator Havugimana's message will be followed by a youth message by Colin Christian Goga from the youth community in Denmark. Senator, welcome. The floor is yours. You may unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ambassador, honorable ministers, honorable members of diplomatic missions, dear genocide survivors, dear friends of Rwanda. Today, the Rwandan community in Sweden and Scandinavian countries at large is gathering for the 27th commemoration of genocide perpetrated against Tutsi in 1994 in Rwanda. 27 years may seem a relatively long period, but we still keep in mind vivid images of that tragedy which took more than 1 million lives in 100 days. We commemorate this event when around the world a series of publications, movies, conferences, and social media messages are being spread out by genocide deniers who take every opportunity to confuse the international community about the reality of what happened in Rwanda in 1994. From April 7th, 1994 to July 4th, 1994, more than 1 million Tutsi were killed in Rwanda. 10,000 people every single day. Unspeakable. They were killed in their houses, in streets, fields, churches, stadiums, and schools. The interim government of Rwanda put in place on April 8, 1994, had only one unique agenda: to wipe out all Tutsi of Rwanda. A final solution. But today, across the world, a number of people in academia, media, institutions assert that there was a double genocide. Some even say that Tutsi were responsible of their death because it is RPF that launched the war in October 1990. They don't ask themselves why there were Rwandan refugees outside the country since 1959. Others say that Hutu refugees were also killed in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, in 1997 when rebels of AFDL, Alliance for Democracy and the Liberation of Laurent Désiré Kabila, former president of Congo, when that movement was fighting to overthrow Mobutu. But many testimonies of Hutu refugees back in Rwanda indicate that Rwandan army had the objective of repatriation of more than 3 million people who were taken as hostages by the genocidal government and the defeated Forces Armées Rwandaises, FAR. A French journalist, Patrick de Saint-Exupéry, has just published a book entitled La Traversée in French, in which he described his journey in DRC from Goma to Kinshasa by car, motorbikes, buses, boats, all means of transport following the tracks of Hutu refugees in 1997. He concluded that there was no genocide of Hutu in Congo. Some people died of hunger, bad health conditions, starvation, but there was no planned intention of killing all Hutu refugees to qualify the killings as a genocide. According to genocide studies scholars, a genocide has 10 stages. First, classification. People are divided into us and them. Second, symbolization. People are forced to identify themselves. Third, discrimination. People begin to face systematic discrimination. Fourth, dehumanization. People are equated to animals, vermin, or disease. In the case of Rwanda, they were called cockroaches, snakes. That was the names given to Tutsi. Fifth, organization. The government create specific groups, military, police, to enforce the policies. Sixth, polarization. The government broadcasts propaganda to turn the populace against the group. That was the case in Rwanda, where they created newspapers like infamous Kangura and RTRM radio. Seventh, preparation. Official action to remove or to relocate people. That has been done already in the 60s, when people were moved from their home provinces to internal displaced camps of refugees. Eighth, persecution. Beginning of murders, theft of property, trial, massacres. That was the case, for example, in March 1992, when people were killed in Bugesera, one region of Rwanda. Ninth, extermination. At this stage, it is wholesale elimination of the group. It is extermination and not murder, because the people are not considered human. It is a kind of ethnic cleansing. Tenth stage is denial. The government denies that it has committed any crime. Honorable Ambassador, honorable ministers, honorable members of diplomatic missions, guests of this ceremony, that is where we are here today, the 10th stage of genocide. And realistically, we cannot expect to see the end of this stage soon. More than 75 years later, we still find Holocaust deniers. We have neo-Nazi movement in Europe. In Rwanda, we will also live together with Tutsi genocide deniers for many more years. This is to say that our fight will be long, but will not be discouraged. We cannot just cross arms and let them continue spreading venom, hate, and division. In Rwanda, we promote justice, reconciliation, and unity for a better future of our country. We do not want our children and grandchildren grow in a divided country where people live aside as enemies. We will continue to fight against genocide ideologies that impede the socio-economic development of our country. Honorable Ambassador, Honorable Ministers, Honorable guests, dear survivors, I thank you for your invitation to share with you this moment. Thanks to all guests for their times. Thanks to all genocide survivors. Thanks to all friends of Rwanda and all Rwandans in general. Together we remember, we reunite and renew. Twibuke, twiyubaka. Thank you all.
Today, we stand together commemorating genocide against the Tutsi. We, the youth, it's our obligation not to forget, also to stay together and fight the genocide ideology. We must never give a chance to those who want to bring us back to the past. Let's stand together to build our future, the future without division, but with harmony and as one for Rwanda and Africa. We want more for now and the generation ahead of us. Remember, renew, and reunite.
Thank you, Senator Habugimana, and thank you, Colin. We will now hear remarks from official representatives from Sweden, the First Deputy Speaker, Åsa Lindestam, and Foreign Affairs Minister, Ann Linde.
Today, we honor the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda 27 years ago. We also honor those who survived and those who refused to take part in the genocide. Rwanda's work in preserving the memory of the genocide, as well as its ongoing efforts in fighting impunity, its reconciliation process and nation building are all commendable. Sweden stands with Rwanda on this journey. We have actively supported Rwanda in the reconciliation process since more than 20 years. Sweden also recognizes the importance of accountability for perpetrators and justice for victims of heinous crimes. To fight impunity is a crucial part of any reconciliation process to achieve long-term stability and nation building. Several trials connected to the genocide in Rwanda has taken place in Sweden. The genocide against the Tutsi happened in Rwanda, but the nature of this horrible crime makes it a crime against all of us. The responsibility of keeping memories alive cannot just be shouldered by survivors and their descendants. We, the international community, have a responsibility to protect and remember. The best way to honor the victims and survivors is to remember, learn from what happened, and ensure it never happens again, anywhere.
Next, we will hear messages from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Finland, with Vice Minister Kai Zawa and Norway's State Secretary, Mr. Jens Frolic-Holt.
I am proud and humbled by the invitation to share this moment of remembrance with the people of Rwanda. It is impossible to imagine what Rwanda went through in 1994. Our thoughts go to all those who lost their loved ones 27 years ago. On behalf of Norway, I want to express my deepest sympathy and regret. I visited the Kigali Genocide Memorial in 2016, and I was deeply affected by that experience. The annual Kwibuka, which commemorates the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, is a painful yet essential reminder of what never must be repeated, and of the importance of reconciliation and the possibility for renewal. Rwanda stands as a shining example of how a people can unite and rebuild even after experiencing unimaginable horrors. I have deep admiration for the will of the Rwandan people to move forward, and I salute Rwanda's path of remarkable recovery since the atrocities were committed in 1994. Today, the whole world stands with you in paying our respect to the victims. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce Her Excellency Ambassador Christine Murikinga, Rwanda's ambassador to the Nordic countries, with closing remarks. Thank you, Your Excellency. The floor is yours.
Honorable Ministers and senior government representatives, honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies, colleagues, ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to start by thanking the First Deputy Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Honorable Minister for Immigration and Integration in Denmark, Honorable Vice Minister of Finland, and Honorable State Secretary at the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their valuable contributions. I also want to thank our Rwandan community living in the Nordic countries who have been showing incredible resilience during these challenging times of COVID-19, as we, for the second year, are not able to gather, commemorate, and mourn together as we used to do. Thank you all, friends and partners, for joining us today for this solemn occasion of the commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We are commemorating for the 27th time, as it was indeed on April 7, 1994, that the genocide started in Rwanda and mercilessly took away more than 1 million cherished and innocent lives. An evil plan that still lasts today. But I will come back to that in a few minutes. Distinguished guests, when we remember, we give dignity to the deceased and show respect to the survivors. It is by remembering that we honor the lives lost, express solidarity with those who survive and still suffer every day. As author Linda Melvin put it, I quote, "The 1994 genocide of the Tutsi is not an event commemorated once a year for the survivors. For them, this is something they live with every single day in their grief, pain, and anger. For them, genocide is a crime without no end." End of quote. Dear Consolé, I thank you so much for sharing with us your painful testimony. I am humbled by your courage, strength, and resilience. I am sure you are a great inspiration to all of us. stay assured that your government, the Rwandan government, will do what it takes to ensure you and no one else has to endure what you went through. Distinguished guests, as you might imagine, the genocide against the Tutsi left so many with such deep and both visible and invisible scars. And if there is anything we can do to honor the victims and comfort the survivors, is to make sure it never happens again. Not in Rwanda, not elsewhere in the world. The evil plans of a genocide don't end when the killing stops. As mentioned by Honorable Dr. Emmanuel, the last stage of genocidal plans is denial and revisionism. And I take this time to thank him very much for his contribution. The denial is that what we see today. People who dare to deny, minimize, or trivialize, and even go as far as to accuse the victims of being responsible for what happened to them. We shouldn't accept it. We cannot remain silent. The truth, the facts cannot be changed, no matter how many lies are spread. And that's also one of the reasons it is important to listen to the survivors. Their painful truth is pure reality. As a matter of fact, on 20th April 2020, the UN General Assembly adopted by consensus the resolution 74/273, reaffirming the 7th April as, I quote, the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, end of quote. But some are still struggling to properly name it the genocide against the Tutsi. If you agree that it was a genocide, why shy away from naming those that were targeted? By willingly omitting to name the victims, they are playing into the hands of the genocide deniers. Dear guests, we can all contribute to the goal of never again if we realize that genocide denial concerns us all, not only Rwandans, all of us. That's why I urge you all to be alert and condemn, or even better, to challenge and fight genocide denial wherever and whenever you encounter it. We owe it to the victims, we owe it to the survivors, and we owe it to the generations to come. Distinguished guests, it was on 11th April, 27 years ago, that the UN mission in Rwanda, known as UNAMIR, left Rwanda. They could have stopped the genocide, but they didn't. This fact is today recognized as one of the biggest failures of the international community. It was the same international community that set up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in an effort to punish those responsible for genocide. But until today, many members of this international community are still reluctant or choose to keep deaf ears when asked to bring genocide perpetrators to justice. By doing so, they are helping genocide suspects to escape justice. Is it really too much to ask from them? Surely not. Today, 27 years later, no country, no matter what reason given, should be a safe haven for fugitive genocidaires. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the countries I am privileged to represent Rwanda to, namely Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Iceland. We much appreciate the trustful relationship and the good collaboration we had, which resulted in the successful trying or extraditing of genocidaires that lived in these countries. To make sure genocide never happens again, we need to ensure justice and accountability. By we, I mean all countries, without exception. As a country, in Rwanda, we've learned many lessons from our painful history. We learned these the hard way, but we took our own destiny in our hands. We chose to embark in a reconciliation process. It was not and is not an easy one, but a necessary one. Justice was an important prerequisite to the reconciliation process. Many of the perpetrators were released after serving their sentence in prison and were reintegrated into society. The process we started of ensuring justice, reconciliation, and building our country is successfully ongoing. We, Rwandans, decided to stay united and to build a new Rwanda, a much better Rwanda, where we all Rwandans have equal rights and live safely. I wish to quote our President, His Excellency Paul Kagame, as he addressed Rwandans and Friends of Rwanda last week on 7th April during the event marking the beginning of the 100 days commemoration period. I quote, "I know for certain that Rwandans will always be ready to protect what we built without hesitation or apology. In Rwanda, we are not being held back. We move forward." End of quote. Distinguished guests, as we commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi for the 27th time, remember. We remember the victims and comfort the survivors. Unite. We unite as Rwandans. We unite with the world for the good of all humanity. Renew. We renew our commitment for a better Rwanda, a better world. Thank you for your kind attention. I now invite you to join me in lighting a candle in remembrance of the victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda.
Rwanda nziza mubyeyi wacu, mbese urabura koma, mugongo waduhetse twese, uraturera turakura, ndabibona kubabaye, ubabajwe n'imfura zawe, twebwe abasigaye tuzaguhoza amarira, tuje kuguhoza twese, twese isonga abana bawe, hora hora
Thank you all for joining the 27th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi that has now come to an end.